The race for the White House is just one day closer, and it is all about the economy.
We have to understand that inflation was, in my opinion, the worst maybe ever in our country.
Because while inflation is down and wages are up, prices are still too high. You know it and I know it.
It ranks among the top, if not the top issue nationwide, with voters citing the economy, inflation, and the cost of goods and services as a main driver of who they're voting for. And with the race between former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris locked in an extremely close race, potential economic turns could decide the election.
Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago?
I am.
No hesitation.
No hesitation at all.
No, I'm not.
And while everyday voters are feeling the squeeze at the grocery store, the gas pump, and daycare center, economists are giving the economy strong marks. But what's behind one of the biggest divides between where the economy is and what voters actually feel? And how could either candidate use it to their benefit with just 13 more days to go until Election Day?
There's never been anything like it in the history of the country. I don't think there's been anything like it even in the history of the world.
And America is ready to chart a new way forward.
This is our ABC News Live primetime coverage, the race for the White House. Good evening, everyone. I'm Linsey Davis. Thank you so much for streaming with us on this edition of Race for the White House, where we'll be covering every political twist and turn leading up to Election Day. Tonight, with just 13 days to go, a massive war of words between former President Trump and his former chief of staff, John Kelly, after Kelly, in an interview with the New York Times, came forward to say Trump fits the, quote, definition of a fascist who praised Hitler on a number of occasions. The former president responded tonight. We'll get to Mary Bruce with her report on that developing story in just a bit. But for the majority of voters nationwide, the decision of who to choose when they walk into the voting booth in less than 2 weeks all comes back to their wallet. Are you better off today than you were 4 years ago is the question that comes up every presidential cycle, and this year is no different. The answer, however, is nuanced, with voters split on just who can best tackle the top issue. Tonight, we'll take you to Pennsylvania for a look at how swing voters who are feeling the economic squeeze could vote and why. Plus, our Alexis Christoforous joins us to break down one of the more far-fetched economic policies floated by one of the candidates and the impact that it could have on your wallet. And she helped save the economy from collapse during the Great Recession. Now she's raising awareness about those recent interest rate hikes that are making your bills a bit less costly. But first, with 24 million Americans who've already cast their early vote for president, we go to ABC's Mary Bruce for late-breaking news from the campaign trail.
Tonight, Vice President Kamala Harris issuing a dire warning after Donald Trump's longest-serving chief of staff, retired four-star Marine General John Kelly, told the New York Times Trump fits the definition of a fascist and that the former president has said Adolf Hitler, quote, did some good things.
It is deeply troubling and incredibly dangerous that Donald Trump would invoke Adolf Hitler, the man who is responsible for the deaths of 6 million Jews and hundreds of thousands of Americans. This is a window into who Donald Trump really is, from the people who know him best, from the people who worked with him side by side in the Oval Office and in the Situation Room.
Kelly telling the Times Trump repeatedly had words of praise for Hitler.
He commented more than once that, you know, that Hitler did some good things too. And of course, if you know history, again, I think he's lacking in that. But if you know what Hitler was all about, it'd be pretty hard to make an argument that he did anything good.
So what would you say when he said to you that Hitler did a lot of good things?
Well, I tell him that. I said, you know, sir, first of all, you should never say that. But if you knew what Hitler was all about from the beginning to the end, everything he did was in support of his racist, fascist life, philosophy, so that nothing he did you could argue was good.
Kelly saying Trump fits the definition of a fascist.
But certainly, the former president is in the far right area. He's certainly an authoritarian. Admires people who are dictators. He has said that. So he certainly falls into the general definition of fascist, for sure.
Kelly insisting personal loyalty means everything to Trump, that he puts it above loyalty to the Constitution, and that he has an affinity for dictators. As news of Kelly's comments broke overnight, Trump was on stage in Greensboro, North Carolina, praising authoritarian leaders like Russia's Vladimir Putin and China's Xi Jinping.
He's smart. He's a smart man. He's a fierce man. I got along with him very well. Putin. These are people that are tough people.
Kelly's statements, an extraordinary move from a four-star general who does not make political endorsements. But Kelly says he felt compelled to speak out after Trump threatened to use the military to go after his political opponents, describing them as the enemy within. Harris seizing on those words today.
Donald Trump has repeatedly called his fellow Americans the enemy from within, and even said that he would use the United States military to go after American citizens. And let's be clear about who he considers to be the enemy from within. Anyone who refuses to bend a knee or dares to criticize him would qualify, in his mind, as the enemy within, like judges, like journalists, like nonpartisan election officials.
Harris warning that if Trump returns to the White House, he won't have Kelly, the former four-star general, and other top officials from his first administration to serve as a line of defense for the nation.
Donald Trump is increasingly unhinged and unstable. And in a second term, people like John Kelly would not be there to be the guardrails against his propensities and his actions. Those who once tried to stop him from pursuing his worst impulses would no longer be there, and no longer be there to rein him in. So the bottom line is this. We know what Donald Trump wants. He wants unchecked power. The question in 13 days will be, what do the American people want?
What do the American voters want? Mary Bruce joins us now from Pennsylvania. And the vice president announced a closing argument speech next Tuesday. What more can you tell us about that?
You know, exactly 1 week out from Election Day, Harris plans to give what's being billed as a major address, her closing argument to the American people and to voters. She's going to be speaking on the Ellipse in Washington, which is the exact same site where Donald Trump addressed his supporters and urged them to march to the Capitol on January 6th. Harris, we are told, is going to use this symbolic site to argue it's time to turn the page on Trump. Lindsay.
And Mary, Harris has certainly been spending a lot of time in those critical blue wall states like Pennsylvania in recent days, but she's also planning to branch out. What do we know about where the vice president is headed the rest of the week?
You know, she's here in Pennsylvania tonight for a town hall, and then tomorrow she's down in Georgia making her first appearance on the trail alongside former President Barack Obama. She's really been leaning in to her heavy hitters out on the trail. Then on Friday, she's down in Houston, Texas, which may not seem like a natural place for her to be going right now, so close to the election, not a battleground state, but she argues that it is ground zero for the fight over abortion and reproductive rights, and that's the case and the issue that she wants to highlight there. Then on Saturday, she's back up in the blue wall. She'll be in Michigan out on the trail for the first time alongside former First Lady Michelle Obama. So, Lindsay, she's trying to do a balancing act here, hitting the key issues, but also, of course, hitting those critical states. Just 12 days to go.
All right, Mary Bruce in Chester, Pennsylvania. Thanks so much, Mary. Former President Donald Trump responded tonight on social media denying John Kelly's allegations, calling them made up and posting, quote, John Kelly is a lowlife and a bad general whose advice in the White House I no longer sought and told him to move on. It was a far cry, certainly, from when the former president called Kelly one of the great chiefs of staff. But Kelly isn't alone in his comments against the former president this election cycle. In fact, he joins a long list of former military personnel and top White House aides who have one by one opposed a second Trump presidency. At a town hall today in the key battleground of Georgia, Trump did not respond to Kelly's comments directly. When asked about the issues that he believes will help him win this very close race, he said immigration and the economy. It is the question that's asked every time the race for president comes around. Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? And we're posing it to voters in one of the most crucial swing states this cycle, Pennsylvania. Elizabeth Schulze traveled from blue-leaning Philadelphia to deep red Lewisburg to find out.
just a small family of 3.
Do you want to put out some Cheez-Its?
We have probably seen a 30% increase in our grocery bill in the last 2 years.
Here in a deep red part of Pennsylvania, Ben McDuffie walks us through his family's monthly budget.
This is really down to the dollar.
Every dollar is meticulously monitored.
Just under $500 is what you have when you look at the budget left to spend every month.
Yeah.
Late last year, Ben lost his job working in financing for the auto industry.
Oh, no. You got sent home.
He spent 3 months unemployed.
Any sense of how many jobs you applied for during those 3 months?
About 200.
Wow.
The job he landed at a local credit union in March was a $30,000 pay cut.
My wages in a full-time capacity should be able to support a basic level of life that I don't feel like we're able to do right now.
Frustrating.
Really frustrating.
Ben calls himself a Democrat, but isn't afraid to cross party lines.
I telephone campaigned in 2000 for John McCain, and I was excited about him.
In this election, he says all you have to do is look at his bills to understand. The economy is Democrats' biggest liability.
You are not living outside of your means. You and your wife have 2 jobs.
We both work full-time. We are not out wasting money. It shouldn't be this tight for how hard we work.
Our latest ABC News Washington Post Ipsos poll shows more than 85% of adults rank the economy and inflation as highly important for their vote for president, by far the 2 highest-ranking issues. And when it comes to handling the economy, former President Trump leads Vice President Harris by 9 points. It's a perception Harris knows she will need to reverse to win over voters in critical battleground states like Pennsylvania that could win her the presidency.
Costs are still too high. And on a deeper level, for too many people, no matter how much they work, it feels so hard to just be able to get ahead.
A handful of Biden-Harris administration policies have aimed to lower costs, from bringing insulin prices down to eliminating junk fees, a campaign the administration has turned into an attempt to ease American stress about high prices.
It was just one of the best days of my life. I'll never forget it.
3 hours southeast of Ben in Philadelphia.
Welcome to Winfield.
Catherine Gilmore Richardson says one single policy changed the financial calculus overnight for her family of 5.
We're packing up to go to school.
In October, her $102,000 in student loans
I received a Master's of Science in Administration.
Disappeared.
You sign into your account, and what happens? You see the balance is 0?
I saw the balance was 0, and I said, let me refresh.
You didn't believe it.
I could not believe it.
As a city council member, Catherine qualified for the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program after President Biden made major reforms.
Thanks to the reforms, more than 700,000 borrowers have had their debts forgiven.
That's a good one.
For Catherine, the administration's fixes to the loan program didn't just get her account processed.
I'll be back. I gotta head out to work, okay?
Her husband and sister, who also work in the public sector, had their debts forgiven too.
Between the 3 of us, we have about $270,000 in student loans that were forgiven.
Wiped away.
Wiped away. More than $250,000.
Catherine knows her experience is rare. Only about 1 in 10 student loan borrowers have seen their debts canceled.
Critics will say, I had to pay my own debt. Why should you have yours forgiven?
I didn't come from a rich family, and we had to work hard to make our way in order to try to attain that dream and receive an education that would help us move on in our lives. And so I understand that not everyone's debt has been forgiven, but I think this is an important step in the right direction to closing the racial wealth gap.
Our thanks to Elizabeth Schulze. One of the pressure points of discussion on the campaign trail, tariffs. Former President Trump has spent weeks talking about his own tariff plan, while Vice President Harris continues to tout her opportunity economy ideas. So what would these plans mean for the economy and for you? To take a closer look, our Alexis Christoforous joins us now in studio. Alexis, let's start with Trump's tariff plan. How much more do you think that it would really add for the goods that we're buying to bring into this country?
You know, Lindsay, it really depends. I mean, we know that Trump has said tariff is the most beautiful word in the dictionary, but I guess the question is, if he is to be reelected, reelected, will he really impose all of these tariffs? I mean, he's talking about 20% across the board and up to 100% against China. Or is this just going to be bluster? You know, he did that when he was in the White House. He negotiated with Japan and South Korea to get us better trade deals, didn't actually impose tariffs there in those instances. And the other unknown, I guess, is whether or not other countries will retaliate, which we did see happen during his first term. And that did cost consumers more money because at the end of the day, a tariff is a tax paid for by importers. They either absorb that tax or pass it along to the consumer. The Peterson Institute actually ran some numbers and said that if his proposed tariffs were implemented, it would cost the typical U.S. household about $2,600 a year. He's also really honing in on the auto industry, right? He has said anywhere from 100% tariffs to 2,000% tariffs. So we ran the numbers, and if importers were to pass that cost along to consumers, a Toyota RAV4, for instance, a brand new one, about $30,000 at 100% tariff, it would double to roughly $60,000. Wow. Under a 200% tariff, you're looking at an $85,000 Toyota.
How does the proposal that Harris is putting on for tariffs vary from the Biden administration?
Well, first, if we just look at it from a Trump perspective, she's called the Trump tariffs a sales tax on consumers because she says the cost is just going to be passed along to consumers. We don't really know much about her tariff position. You know, if you go to her website, she hasn't talked about it during the debate with you and David. She hasn't talked about it on the campaign trail. But if you go to her website, it states she will not tolerate what she calls unfair trade practices from China or any competitor that undermines American workers. So you can interpret that however you wish. But we saw it happen with the Biden administration. They railed against those Trump tariffs, left many of them in place and built upon them. We don't know if Harris would do the same.
Okay, so still kind of a wait and see on some of those.
It is.
Alexis, thank you.
You bet.
And still to come, inflation is down. So why is price fatigue so high? The former chair of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation breaks it down for us next. Welcome back. The Federal Reserve's rate cut last month, its first in more than 4 years, was cheered by many corporations and big investors as well as borrowers hoping for lower mortgage, auto, and credit card rates. One recent report called the U.S. economy, quote, hot, hot, hot with high retail sales and a strong labor market. But why aren't the voters feeling it? Joining us now is Sheila Bair, former chair of the FDIC, the U.S. Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, who served both Presidents Obama and George W. Bush and was instrumental during the financial crisis. Thank you so much for joining us. Even though consumers are unhappy with the stubbornly high costs of food and fuel, inflation has eased dramatically. So why aren't you more optimistic?
It is. Well, actually, I think the economy's quite strong. I actually think higher interest rates have helped our economic growth. There's a lot of research that shows low rates really are not conducive to economic growth. You have very inefficient allocation of capital when interest rates are so low and money is so cheap. It is not necessarily invested in smart ways. So the higher rates actually have brought greater productivity, real wage growth, a very strong labor market. And, you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I think look, we've been through some tough times. Prices are much higher than they were 4 or 5 years ago. But now, fortunately, those numbers are coming down. Housing's still a real problem. But other than that, I think, you know, to the extent people are unhappy, I think it's because home prices and other prices are so much higher than they used to be. And that's why I think it really should be a priority to the Fed not to cut rates precipitously, because that could bring a resurgence of inflation. I think that's really where people are feeling the pinch, why they're unhappy, and why they will be very unhappy if we see it come back.
The stock market keeps hitting record highs. Home prices, as you just mentioned, they are as well. Is there any evidence that we're living inside an asset bubble?
Yeah. No, I don't think so. I think, again, higher rates kind of help adjust for that. Very low rates do create asset bubbles. With housing, we have a classic supply-demand problem. The Fed took mortgage rates, real rates, deeply negative to respond to the pandemic, but the housing market has been constrained for a long time on the supply side. So you had a lot more people coming in to buy homes with these super low mortgage rates, and the supply wasn't there. We still have that imbalance, and people really need to focus on increasing supply of homes, especially starter homes. I really hope that that would be more of the focus with the presidential candidates and leadership at the state and local level, too, because a lot of the problems with supply relate to zoning and permitting requirements that are unnecessarily onerous and expensive, especially for those lower cost starter homes.
Of course, the economy has long been the #1 issue for voters. Do you think there's any chance in the, less than 2 weeks that we have before Election Day that might drop at all?
Well, maybe. You know, I hope people are starting to feel better about it. Look, we've been through a lot of trauma, right? We had this terrible recession after the great financial crisis. Then we had the pandemic. We've been through a lot of economic trauma, and people, I think, are scarred and they're worried, about it. And so, but I think the more our economy continues to show strong growth as it is now, the more confident they will feel about it. Whether that's going to happen in time for the elections, I don't know. But I think the good news is, looking forward, we're on a very positive trajectory. And again, I think really cutting rates precipitously could screw this up. We don't want a resurgence of inflation, because that's been the bottom line problem.
All right, as long as you say the positive trajectory is ahead, then that's what we need to hear. Sheila Bair, former chair of the FDIC, we thank you so much for your insight and time.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Now let's bring in Democratic strategist Megan Hayes and Tricia McLaughlin, a Republican strategist. Thank you both so much for joining us. A recent AP poll found that 62% of voters had an unfavorable view of our current economy, but voters were split on which candidate could handle it best. They have 13 days now to get undecided voters to go with their policies. Is there anything that they say, you think, at this point that can get them to go with their plan? And Tricia, let's start with you.
Well, I think Donald Trump's record speaks for itself. As far as, you know, from 2016 up until the pandemic, we had increased wages while we had low inflation and low unemployment. So I think that speaks for itself. Meanwhile, the last 4 years, we've experienced double inflation, 20% higher prices. I think Kamala Harris absolutely needs to create more daylight between her and the Biden-Harris administration, which has been historically unpopular. I think today was very unfortunate. Her closing argument wasn't going to be, what can I do for the American people? How am I going to lower costs? How am I going to make you have affordable rent, affordable housing? Instead, it was what we've been hearing for the last 10 years, that Donald Trump is the next Hitler. It was really disappointing. It was really dangerous for the country. And I think we'll see those results at the polls on November 5th.
And Megan, how about you?
I think that the vice president has laid out a lot of policies moving forward, and unemployment is at a record low. I think that they inherited an economy that wasn't very strong, and I think people are starting to see that. Prices are coming down. Gas is under $3 in a lot of places. Wages are increasing. She's doing a lot of things for corporate price gouging, and she has talked about her policies more. I do agree that she probably does need to continue to chart her path that she wants to lay out that's different from what the Biden administration is doing. And I think that she can do that in the next 13 days. She has a CNN town hall later this evening that, you know, is another opportunity for her, and she's meeting voters where they are. I do think that part of her closing argument, though, is to draw the contrast between her and Donald Trump. So where the comments that General Kelly made today were extremely shocking and upsetting to a lot of people, it is important for her to have people understand why that is important, and that should be part of her closing argument, as well as laying out her policies for the economy.
And Megan, let's stay with you for a moment. A recent Lending Tree report found that in 16 of the nation's largest 100 cities, childcare costs more than rent. For example, in Governor Walz's home state, the childcare average in Minneapolis is more than $1,700, while rent for a two-bedroom home is closer to $1,600. This is happening as Harris is vice president. Why do you feel that voters should trust her to make it a priority if she's actually elected to become president?
Look, when you are the vice president, and this is something that Joe Biden knows very well, when you are the vice president, you are not setting policy. You are there to execute policy. You are in the number two. So the president has been setting policy. There were a lot of things on the docket when they got into the White House that needed to be addressed. They passed some monumental the infrastructure bill and the Inflation Reduction Act and all these different policies, the CHIPS and Science Act, that are really helping the economy that we will see growing. But I do think people have to take her at her word. It is something that she's been passionate about and has talked about on the campaign trail. And it is something that needs to come down, and she recognizes that and talks about it. So I think that her acknowledging it is a step that people need to recognize, and I think that she means what she says.
And Tricia, on the other hand, former President Trump has been criticized for not having a specific plan for this, health care, or several other issues. How can voters feel that those things will be a priority for him if he's elected?
Well, I think on the health care issue, he has talked about cutting regulation. I think he should be more specific in these last 13 days and really present more of a plan. But the two issues that are top of minds for Americans right now are the economy and is immigration, including mass deportation. More than half of Americans are for that, and he has laid out a plan. Housing as well, he has gotten into specifics on as far as using federal land and increasing supply. So I do hope in these last coming days he talks more about health care, because it is on the minds of the American people.
All right, Megan Hayes, Tricia McLaughlin, we thank you both so much for your time and staying up with us. That is our Race for the White House coverage for this hour. I'm Linsey Davis. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. Thanks so much for streaming with us. Have a great night.